We are so excited. We are partnering with the Yale Veterans Group, which is a shared interest group at Yale that connects and engages a robust community of some 10,000 Yalees who are military veterans and actively serving members of the U.S. Armed Forces and its allies. The mission of this group is to support and uplift the veteran community, to improve U.S. civil military relations, address salient issues related to veterans and national security, and to reaffirm Yale's highest tradition of leadership and service to the nation. So we are very, very grateful for their support and welcome all of those members who are here today. And then we also are partnering with the Yale Club of Boston, whose president, Brian Heffling, is with us, who was actually, as you may remember, one of our very first Yale Alumni Live guests, who actually delivered a wonderful cocktail class for us that we may need to revisit, Brian. I don't know if you've got some new recipes up your sleeve, but Brian, why don't you just say hello and tell everybody just a little bit about the club in Boston before we get started.
Sure thing. Thanks, Stephanie. As she said, folks, I'm Brian Heffling, Ezra Stiles, class of 2012. I am the president of the Yale Club of Boston. We are the third largest and second oldest organized community of Yale alumni on earth. And we have, of course, been virtual only for the last few months, but our virtual events are open to Yaleys from all over. I encourage everybody, but particularly those in Massachusetts, to check us out at yaleboston.org if you are interested. We are managing to maintain usually 2-ish events per month for the time being. And we are extremely excited to be able to partner on this particular event with the YAA and the Yale Veterans Association to bring, I would say, one of the 7 wonders of Boston to a wider audience. And I think on that note, I will turn things over to our panelists. Once again, President and CEO of the USS Constitution Museum, Anne Grimes Rand, and Ed Sevilla, class of '82, Chief Development Officer of same. Thank you guys for being here.
Well, thank you, Brian, for that nice introduction. We do think that USS Constitution is the wonder of Boston Harbor, and the museum where we work is a private nonprofit museum just across the dock from the ship. So the ship is still an active duty Navy vessel, and we'll be going aboard for a tour with a member of her crew. Ed and I work at the museum just across the dock, where we can keep the artifacts dry. We can share the stories of where the ship sailed, who served aboard, what their life at sea was like, whether it's 200 years ago during the War of 1812, or we also tell the story of the crew who serve aboard today. So this is a very special day in Constitution's history, which you will learn about when we go aboard ship. And we're getting some images here. If we go forward one more from, we'll give you a tour, a little glimpse into the museum, and here we are. Now you can see USS Constitution in her glory there with her sails set. She was launched in 1797, but still active duty, still flagship of our Navy. Actually, she was voted recently by Congress as America's Ship of State. And just across the dock, you can see the USS Constitution Museum, which is where I am right now. And we welcome visitors and share the stories, share the artifacts. We have the best collection of USS Constitution material in the world. We also have a real emphasis on hands-on learning and active participation. So you can come to the museum and design your own virtual frigate and launch it and fight that against whoever came with you in your party. You can try, we simplify the steps required to fire a cannon, or we invite visitors. On Constitution, you can see that you'd have to climb about 100 feet up in the air to furl a sail. At the USS Constitution Museum, you only have to step about a foot off the deck to stand on a foot rope and furl a sail. So we try and let people not only learn about history, but experience history in our galleries. And we are a nonprofit museum telling the story of an active duty Navy ship. So while tax dollars support Constitution, the museum relies on the generosity of our visitors. We have been just experienced, as you can all imagine, a COVID closure for 5 months. We just reopened our doors 2 weeks ago, so we are so excited to welcome visitors back to the museum. For our Yale Boston friends, we're open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 10 to 5. And we hope that if you're ready to get out of the house, and you'll be excited after this presentation. You will come on down and visit us. The mission of the museum is to engage all ages in the stories of old Ironsides, to spark excitement about maritime heritage, naval service, and the American experience. So when you come and visit, you can experience our award-winning exhibits and all that we have to offer. But we also have a special tie-in with Yale today that I want to ask Ed to tell you the story about next.
Terrific. And welcome everybody. And Stephanie, you might advance to the next slide, because we want to be talking, of course, about Admiral Grace Murray Hopper. Do we have any Hopper College alumni with us? Please feel free to comment in the chat on that. There are three connections between Admiral Hopper, the Constitution, and the Museum of note today to kick us off and connect the museum to the ship to present-day Navy. Admiral Hopper's retirement ceremony was held aboard USS Constitution. It was just about 34 years ago, on August 14th, 1986. That year, the museum named Admiral Hopper as an honorary trustee, and she has also received the museum's highest award at the time. That's the Samuel Eliot Morison Award, and that award honors a person, this is the citation, whose public service has enhanced the image of USS Constitution and who reflects the best of Admiral Morison: artful scholarship, patriotic pride, and eclectic interest in the sea and things maritime, and a desire to preserve the best of our past for future generations. And certainly Admiral Hopper embodies those characteristics for the museum and, of course, exemplary characteristics for Yale. Many of you may know, but I'm happy to share this fun story from her background as a computer pioneer, in a way, as a way to kind of bring the spirit of Admiral Hopper to us, with us today. This, of course, is the somewhat apocryphal story of the first instance of the actual computer bug being found. I want to share with you some information from the Computer History Museum, our fellow museum, and they report that on September 9th, 1947, 3:45 p.m., Grace Murray Hopper records the first computer bug in the Harvard Mark II computer's logbook. Now, this being Yale, we see, of course, the Harvard computer had a bug. But the problem was traced to a moth stuck between relay contacts in the computer, which Hopper duly taped into the Mark II's logbook with the explanation, "First actual case of bug being found." The bug was actually found by others, but Hopper made the logbook entry. So that's a fun apocryphal story. We can even go beyond that with our Yale audience to say that the Yale Book of Quotations notes that the phrase bug was used even before the computer era. And the Yale Book of Quotations has a letter from Thomas Edison in 1878 describing problems as bugs. And so, to be accurate, Admiral Hopper didn't invent the word bug, but she's very associated with the moth story. We understand she was fond of telling that story, and I wanted to share that with you today as a way of bringing Admiral Hopper with us. I'd also like to add that from the press accounts of her retirement aboard the ship, 250 people were attended, including the Secretary of the Navy. She stated that she's loved every minute of her time in the Navy. And this is a quote I want to share with you. She said, "I'm the very last of the waves to leave active duty." That's the acronym WAVES. She said, "To this day, I am a woman available for volunteer emergency service." And that was, of course, the Women's Auxiliary during the U.S. Naval Reserve during World War II. And she accepted the day upon her retirement the Department of Defense's top award, the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. So that is just a little bit more background. Some of you may have heard those Hopper stories, but I wanted to connect Admiral Hopper to the museum. And if you could go to the next slide, Stephanie, the Admiral Hopper connects also to today's Navy, because in 1996, the Navy launched and christened the USS Hopper, named for the Admiral. The ship was built here in New England, in Bath, Maine. The ship is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, and you can see some artifact here of the poster of her launch in Bath, Maine. Stephanie, the next slide gives us a picture of the ship. She is, as I understand it, only the second U.S. Navy warship to be named for a woman from the Navy's own ranks. She's the 20th destroyer of her class, and Hopper has participated in multiple deployments in East Asia and the Persian Gulf. And the next slide will show you that this is a picture of Hopper today. USS Hopper is based in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This is a photo of Hopper in port. And Pearl Harbor gives us a chance to bring another connection to USS Constitution and to the Hopper. And I'd like to ask Anne to take us to kind of through the museum archives, if you will, for some pictures and a great story about Constitution and Pearl Harbor.
Thank you, Ed. Constitution did visit Honolulu in the 1840s. If you think about a ship that was launched in 1797, so she's about 50 years old, and she was sent out in support of our trade in the 1840s. So Constitution had sailed from Boston, and she sailed down, dropped our minister in Rio de Janeiro, then sailed around the tip of Africa, stopped in Mozambique and Madagascar. In Sumatra, we were sailing in support of the pepper trade. She went to Borneo, hoping to negotiate for coal, because we're just at the transition between the sailing navy and the steam-powered navy. She continued from there on to the Pacific, and there's a view you see on the screen now from our collection of a warship in Honolulu. And it's a 19th century warship. We're not sure, it's not clear if it's Constitution or another ship, but we know Constitution was there in 1845, and she dropped the hook, took on the supplies that she needed. She was on her way back home. She had completed the mission of her journey and had been at sea nearly 2 years. So the crew were anxious to continue from Hawaii. They went next to Mazatlan, Mexico, and then eventually around the Horn and back to Boston. But when they were in Hawaii, this was a time when Hawaii was independent, but the global powers were looking at Hawaii, and the king was interested in, how can I best defend myself? Where should we build a fort? They had an old fort that was no longer useful, and there was an American missionary there who worked for the Hawaiian government, and he went to Constitution's second lieutenant, Marine lieutenant, and asked, what do you think, if we were trying to fortify this area, what do you suggest? So while Constitution was in harbor, they took soundings in different areas, visited, and the Constitution had set sail for Mazatlan, but Constitution's lieutenant sent back a report and said, if you want to fortify, if you want to be able to defend yourself, I would fortify the mouth of the Pearl River. And he gave very specific instructions about forts, placements, ideas for how you could really work to defend yourself on the Hawaiian Islands. And if we go to the next slide, we will move forward in time, and you can see by 1941, much had changed at the mouth of the Pearl River, but there it is, well fortified, just nearly a month and a half before the day that would live in infamy with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So not many people think of our naval history or think of USS Constitution or her crew helping to set the seeds for our naval base in Hawaii, but that is Constitution's tie to Hawaii. And now we are going to continue moving forward through time and fast forward right up to the present day. And I am going to turn it back to Ed.
Terrific. And Stephanie, if you can move to the next slide, because to the present day, we have our special guest for you today, Lieutenant Admiral Wilhelm, class of 17, Davenport, I might add, graduate of the Naval ROTC, is the first information warfare officer. She currently serves aboard USS Hopper, stationed in Pearl Harbor, to make that connection. And we have Lieutenant Wilhelm with us live today. So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind cutting the Zoom over to Lieutenant Wilhelm, and we've asked her to share some thoughts and remarks for today. And Amor, I think you can go ahead. And okay. Kevin will get the slide over.
Aloha and good afternoon. Again, my name is Amor Wilhelm. I'm class of 2017 from Davenport. It's the best college over at Yale for sure. I'd first off like to thank Edward Sevilla of the USS Constitution Museum, and also Henry Kwan of the Yale Veterans Association for bringing me up for the opportunity to speak. While at Yale, I was actually very, very blessed to be part of the newly reestablished Yale Naval ROTC unit. And in May of 2017, I commissioned as an information warfare officer, probably the first information warfare officer to commission out of Yale directly. And while in ROTC, I never actually envisioned that I'd serve in this capacity, since ROTC midshipmen can usually only commission into a select few jobs: surface warfare, submarines, and aviation. So information warfare, or IWOs as we're called in the fleet, we're essentially responsible for the full spectrum of cyber, cryptology, and signals intelligence, information operations, computer network operations, communications, and electronic warfare missions across all domains, even space. So there are 4 flavors of information warfare officers. There's cryptology, intelligence, meteorology, and oceanography, and what I am, which is an information professional. And information professionals, as vague as that may sound, are actually responsible for communications and the network security side of the house. So as you can imagine, information warfare is directly involved in every aspect of naval operations. IWOs must deliver timely and relevant information to the decision maker related to defending and exploiting vulnerabilities in the information domain. So with the larger direction and role that the information warfare field is taking in our Navy today, I'm incredibly excited and honored to be part of this community. While at Yale, I actually studied molecular, cellular, and developmental biology, but I wish I'd taken more computer science courses and followed more directly in the path that Grace Hopper had laid. As now that I'm an IWO, I'm able to see the true benefit and importance of the field. Interestingly enough, though, we do already have 4 information warfare officers from the classes of 2016 through 2019. And our first commissioning class for ROTC was only in 2015, since it had been reestablished. I'm sure more Yaleys will join in service, first and foremost, but also in the information warfare domain as more Yaleys are commissioning through ROTC. So upon receiving the invitation to provide remarks for this event, I was truly honored to be considered. Rear Admiral Grace Hopper is not only the namesake of a college at Yale, but she's also been one of my role models since my freshman year as a service member and a female in service. 7 years later and 3.5 years into my active duty service, I'm now a JG, a Lieutenant JG in the U.S. Navy, serving aboard her namesake as the Communications Officer, Cyber Officer, and Information Systems Security Manager. I'd like to think that Rear Admiral and fellow Yaley, Grace Hopper herself would be proud to know that the first information warfare officer on board her namesake would not only be a female, but also one that studied STEM at Yale and was serving with the first female commanding officer of a Navy warship named after a female, Commander Catherine Dolly. While information warfare is a relatively new commissioning pipeline in the Navy, it's one that directly stems from Grace Hopper's work, her pioneering work in computer systems. And personally, I'd like to believe that she was the first information warfare officer. So I'm proud to actively continue her legacy as a female naval officer, and truly, truly grateful that we are continuing to honor her work.
Thank you, Amor, for sharing those terrific words. So folks, today we've heard a distinctly Yale story, right? We're connecting USS Constitution, Admiral Hopper, to the waves, to Pearl Harbor, to the USS Hopper, to Naval ROTC at Yale, to Lieutenant Wilhelm, who's inspired by Admiral Hopper. So thank you so much. We're grateful for young leaders like you, Amor, and to be able to tell your story to the Yale alumni audience today. And so with that, we can get ready to head over to the ship. Anne, do you want to go to the next slide and kind of give us an introduction, and then we'll meet head over to the ship for the tour.
Okay. Yes, we are. If we go one slide further, we will be able to help you move across the pier from the Constitution Museum, heading back to the ship. And, oh, that's okay. We are fortunate. USS Constitution, as we mentioned, is still an active duty Navy vessel. So there's a crew of about 70 folks who are working aboard Constitution, keeping this wooden warship ship shape. There we go. We have our commanding officer, John Benda, is the 76th to serve in command of USS Constitution. And you can see he is wearing, Constitution's crew are the only ones who are authorized to wear traditional 1812 style uniforms. So John Benda, who you see here, is a great colleague and friend to the museum, our 76th commanding officer. He took command in February. And now we can go over to Constitution, and we have Seaman Sec waiting to give us a tour live from the decks of Old Ironsides.
Hey, how's it going, Seaman Sec? Glad to have you guys with us. So as you can see right now, we are on the spar deck, which is the main deck. I don't know for the first part, am I just doing a quick brief introduction about myself, or what? How are we doing this?
The whole thing, Sec. Seaman, just go ahead.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So yeah, right now we are on the spar deck, and as one of the people mentioned earlier, today's a very important day for USS Constitution. It's the anniversary of the battle with the HMS Guerriere. As we all know, the HMS Guerriere was Her Majesty's ship. It was a British ship, and it was one of the first ship-to-ship and ship-on-ship engagements that we had during the War of 1812. And not only did we win that, but it was a very important battle because it signified to people back home that the expensive budget of the USS Constitution, which took up more than half of the budget that was allocated, which was the Naval Armament Act allocated $600,000 to build 6 frigates, 6 of the original frigates. Of course, the Constitution being one of them, the other one being the United States, the President, the Chesapeake, the Congress, and the Constellation. All right, but the USS Constitution took up more than half of that budget with $302,000. So this it was a very it was a big investment, and it's one of those investments that people did not believe in at first. But the battle with the HMS Guerriere reflected that maybe spending all that taxpayer money on such an expensive frigate like this one actually was a good source of raw money. So we're going to go down to the gun deck, which is most of where our tour is going to take place, and that's where I'm going to talk about. I'm going to really dive into the battle with the HMS Guerriere and how exactly we won that, because keeping in mind, at this time we were a relatively small navy. The British had about 600 ships compared to ours, like 60 ships, and most of those were merchant ships converted into warships. So it puts into perspective how large the British Navy was and how already respected they were. And for us to kind of come in and not only defeat the British during the War of 1812 through a series of strategic naval battles that we fought, for us to do that, not only win, really set the tone. So let me take you guys on down here. All right, welcome to the gun deck. All right, it's called the gun deck for obvious reasons. This is, of course, these right here. Every gun right here is a long gun, which is a 65. It weighs 6,500 pounds, and it fires a shot of 24 pounds. It fires a 24-pound shot, and it has a range. The long guns have a range of 1,200 yards, and it took about 9 to 14 men to man. But we come on the gun deck because the guns were very crucial to helping us win these wars. If you guys will come over here, I'm gonna take you to one of the guns right here. All right. So before I start talking about the HMS Guerriere, the actual battle with the HMS Guerriere, I want to go into a little bit of a background of what was happening around that time. So battle took place on August 19, 1812, and pretty much going back to about a month ago, July 16 to July 19 was the Great Escape, and pretty much what the Great Escape was, it's exactly as it sounds. We were pretty much escaping from 5 British ships. We were off the coast of Egg Harbor, New Jersey, and we spotted 5 ships off into the distance, and pretty much they ended up being 5 British ships, 5 enemy ships. And of course, it was 5 against 1. It was 5 against just the USS Constitution. We didn't have any Allied ships surrounding us. So we pretty much had to ended up resorting to running away from the British, all right? And keeping in mind that the War of 1812 started actually in June. So this was the first engagement of the War of 1812, and we unfortunately had to resort to running away. So it was not a great start to the war, but Captain Isaac Hall, who was the captain of the USS Constitution at the time, as we'll get to learn, he will get to have his redemption and his revenge, because this did catch him off guard. And, it doesn't take a genius to know that it's 5 ships against 1, so he had to end up fleeing. So pretty much what happened, over a series of 3 days, this was in the dead of summer, so we actually didn't have enough wind power, and we had to resort to a lot of different techniques to help escape from the British. And we pretty much did everything we could, from dousing the sails, which is pretty much soaking the sails in water in order to increase their surface area. Think about it like lungs, just kind of soaking the sails in water can help them suck in more air, if you're thinking about it like lungs. And we also had to pretty much jettison, which is throwing stuff off the side of the USS Constitution in order to lighten the load. We also had to use kedging, which is pretty much rowing a couple boats out and in front of the ship, and then dropping those anchors, rowing a couple boats out in front of the ship with anchors in them, dropping those anchors, and then pretty much that pulls the ship forward. All right. Anyways, all you gotta understand that this was all over a series of 3 days. It was a very tenuous task. It took a lot of manpower, a lot of energy, but we did end up escaping, and we did end up coming back to Boston Harbor on July 19th. So that's pretty much what happened. All right. And so fast forward to August 19th, we actually headed back out on August 2nd to sea, and we had no specific orders. We pretty much headed back out there looking for revenge. Captain Isaac wanted revenge because, just like I said, his first engagement with another British ship, he had to ended up running. So we headed back out on August 2nd. All right. The battle actually took place on August 19th. So pretty much what we were doing within those 2 weeks leading up to the battle is we were preparing. We were doing gun drills. All right. We worked out firing the guns. We cut it down to about 90 seconds. All right. And our predecessors, our enemies at that time, could only fire the gun at minimum 2 minutes. So we were doing gun drills. We're working on quick furling the sails, rigging, all that kind of stuff, so we can be a cohesive unit. All right. And that's exactly what we did during those 2 weeks leading up to the battle. We were preparing. Just to put it into perspective, Captain Isaac Hall, again, he really wanted revenge against the HMS, against the 5 British ships that chased him. All right. And what do you know? On August 19th, we spotted an enemy ship off into the distance. It was about 9 a.m. All right. We spotted an enemy ship. Actually, we didn't know it was an enemy ship, but of course, as we moved closer and closer together, we realized that it was actually not just an enemy ship, but it was one of the enemy ships that had chased us earlier from July 19th. So and this turned out to be the HMS Guerriere, of course. So as we inch closer and closer to each other, all right, we started at about 400 yards out. That's when the HMS Guerriere actually fired first, all right? And they fired a broadside, all right? And of course, Captain Isaac Hall, being the brilliant strategist that he was, he waited until they were just within 200 yards for us to actually fire back at them. And what we pretty much did is we fired a broadside, which is pretty much firing the guns from in sequential order, all the way from the first gun over there, all the way forward of the ship to all the way aft of the ship. All right, we fired them one by one by one by one. That's what a rolling broadside is, and that, of course, its sole purpose is, of course, not to damage the structural integrity of the hull. So we fired a couple broadsides at them. They fired back at us. Of course, now we are in the heat of battle. I want you guys to imagine how, just the absolute bedlam and absolute chaos it would have been on these decks. Just each and every single gun right here. It's very loud. If you guys ever, if you live in the Boston area, you probably hear our saluting battery for evening or morning colors, and it's very loud. You got a lot of smoke all over the place, but it was all what I like to call controlled chaos, all right, because we had been practicing for moments like this, all right? So they're firing at us. Now we're firing at them, firing broadsides. And of course, Captain Isaac Hall decides to cross the T, which is pretty much cross in front of the enemy ship, all right? Making a T formation with us and the HMS Guerriere in order to fire broadsides at them, so they wouldn't be able, because if we cross in front of them, they don't have firepower in the forward of the ship. So we would actually be able to fire at them. They wouldn't be able to fire back. All right, and that's exactly what we did. We wanted to cross the T, and there's a lot of nautical stuff that you got to take into consideration. And what actually happened was we ended up crashing into the Guerriere. All right, so we ended up crashing into the Guerriere, and the captain of the Marines at the time was Captain William S. Bush, and he raised his cutlass up in the air. He asked Captain Isaac Hull for permission. Shall I board her? All right, and of course, as he was doing that, he unfortunately got shot. All right, this puts in perspective the role the Marines played. The Marines were actually their original role was to board other ships. They were kind of our infantry force out at sea. You know, where our sailors will do, of course, taking care of the ship, actually making sure that the ship sails. The Marines played the role of boarding the ships, and you know, they were the snipers. Just like I said, they were our infantry force out at sea. Think about it like that. All right. So William S. Bush, unfortunately, he was actually the first Marine to die on board the USS Constitution. The second lieutenant for the Marines, second in command for the Marines, he did the same thing, and unfortunately he got shot, and pretty much the boarding attempt failed. All right, so the boarding attempt failed, and keeping in mind, that's actually the captain arriving on board. Keeping in mind that give me a second, I lost my, is it coming down?
No, I think he's staying up there.
Oh, okay, all right.
I think he's got a guest on board.
Sorry about that. It was like the captain coming aboard. So keep in mind that at this whole time, we're actually exchanging fire back and forth with each other, all right? The boarding attempt failed, unfortunately, but within, this all took a series of about only 30 minutes. And as we were pulling apart from the HMS Guerriere, we actually, as we were pulling apart from them, they had actually taken a lot of damage. And we had taken very minimal damage. We had maybe lost a couple of sails and maybe took a little bit of damage to our hull. But the HMS Guerriere by this time was actually critically ruined. So it was, so that's actually how we won that battle. So just like I said, going back to what I said, it pretty much signified to people back home that that maybe like this expensive ship that they had to end up allocating $302,000 out of a budget of $600,000. Maybe it wasn't in vain after all. So that's how we won the battle with the HMS Guerriere. Again, that's our first and most important battle. And yeah, today is the anniversary of that, and we had a 21 gun salute. We actually fired off 23 rounds here on the ship. Right now they're having a barbecue, they're having a little shindig just to kind of celebrate. It's going to be a short day for us. So it's a very important day here on the USS Constitution, commemorating the win over the HMS Guerriere.
Really, that's where it's.
Thank you so much, Seaman Seek. So I think we may have reached the portion of our day where we're going to take questions and answers from those of you watching today. Is that, we feel good about that, Ed and Ann and Seek?
Yeah,
and
I think
Amor?
we might first, particularly if there are any questions for the Seaman Seek, since he's on duty, and since Captain Benda I heard right above, I can only imagine very surely Captain Benda might have something for him to do. So.
All the stars aligned today, and we definitely don't want to keep Seaman Seek from the party. So if anyone who is watching has any questions about the ship and the tour that Seaman Seek has just given, please feel free to put those in the chat in Facebook or in the chat in Zoom. I did see one question, and I'm not sure who might want to answer this, but why is the ship called Old Ironsides? And I think there's a reference to Paul Revere in here. I don't know who might like to field that question, but
I'd say maybe the Ann or Seek.
Yeah,
Seek, yeah, go.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So that we actually got that nickname during the battle with the HMS Guerriere, and pretty much what was happening is when the British were shooting at us, a sailor looked over the side and said, "Huzzah! Her sides are made of iron." And of course, we're not actually the hull is not actually made of iron, but it was specially constructed using meshing of white oak, live oak, and then white oak. You think about it like an Oreo cookie. The chocolate outsides are the white oak, and then the creamy delicious inside. Sorry for making y'all hungry, but the creamy delicious inside is the live oak. So that's pretty much live oak at the time was very rare, and we had the privilege of getting that. We got that from the swampy South Forest of Georgia. And our enemies at the time, they only used white oak. So it was a very special type of wood. It's a very dense wood. It had a high curved growth, meaning when something hit it, when something hit the wood, it kind of splintered within itself. So that's again, our sides are not actually made of iron, but it was a very special construction. This was state of the art technology at the time that helped us pretty much win that battle. So.
Thank you, Steve. So we have a few more questions that I think I'm going to direct towards you while we still have you. We have another question that just came through in the Zoom, and it is, does the Constitution stay in port or does it sail around? And we actually received 2 of those. So everybody would like to know if you could answer that.
Yes, so we do actually sail around, hence that addition of oldest commissioned warship afloat. There is an older commissioned warship that is the HMS Victory. It's in dry dock in England, but of course it's in dry dock. It doesn't move. It's stationary. So the biggest difference between the HMS Victory and the USS Constitution is that we actually do take it out. It's a float. We actually do take it out. We were supposed to take it out 6 times this year, one of those days to commemorate the 4th of July. But unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, we were limited to just actually the ship is barely even rigged right now. So, but we do take it out to sail. Last year, I believe they took it out. I'm not sure how many times last year, but I believe it was like 6 times as well. But yes, she still does float, and we do rig her, and we climb up the mast, and we actually practice furling the sails and unfurling the sails. So to take her out to sail. So she still does float.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We have a few more questions about the ship, Sik, if you can hang with us. One of the questions that we got in Zoom is also, how much of the ship is original material? What kinds of things on the ship are original to its construction?
Right, so we like to say about 14 to 15% of the ship is still original. And pretty much the keel is one of those components that is still original to the build of from 1797 when she was constructed. Let's see what else. The keel is it's probably one of the only components that is actually still original to the ship. Everything else was kind of restored over time, especially during the 1927 restoration. A lot of renovations were made. So, and of course, a lot of people like to, say, well, if the keel is probably one of the only components that is still original to the ship, then, she technically doesn't exist anymore. And it's like, the argument to that is, ever since she was built, they were making constant renovations on her. So, so the keel is one of those original components, and it accounts to about 14 to 15% of the overall ship that wasn't actually renovated or wasn't renewed in the restoration of 1927.
Thank you. We have another really relevant question, especially considering the storms that passed through New England a week and a half ago now. The question is because it's hurricane season, how is the Constitution protected during really severe weather?
Well, we do what we can. We have what's called a heavy weather bill, which is pretty much we just take certain precautions when the weather does get out of hand to pretty much tighten everything down on the decks, and pretty much we do what we can. There isn't anything special, that we do to counteract if it's a hurricane warning. We just make sure everything is tied down and make sure everybody's in a safe position if something like that is to happen. So yeah, just, just tighten everything down and, hope for the best.
You do exactly what the rest of us had to do, right? Just hunker down and see what happens.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad everybody has weathered the storm, although we did have quite a bit of power outages here in Connecticut, so we're all still kind of recovering. But we have the same question came through about 3 or 4 different times, so everyone is dying to know how you became assigned to this ship and how do people become assigned to this ship? Is it, was there a process? Was there something special about it? Was it luck of the draw? Tell us a little bit about how you came to be there and how others come to be on the ship as well.
Well, a little bit of luck to it, I would say, to say the least. I remember for me, I was in boot camp. I think we got about here at the USS Constitution, we got about 30% of the people here come straight from boot camp, and then about the rest of them, 7%, are fleet returnees. So for me, I remember getting interviewed in boot camp by some guy. He's a high-ranking member, Command Master Chief Twyford. I didn't actually know what I was getting interviewed for. They just said, show up here, that's an order. So I showed up, and I guess I happened to have one of the rates or one of the jobs that would qualify for a command like this. And yeah, I showed up, he said, what do you know about the USS Constitution? And I'm like, I absolutely don't know anything about it, but I'm like, what do you know about, and he said, what do you know about the US history or the Revolutionary War? And I told him what I knew. And yeah, it was just, a lot of it was just kind of lucky because there were a lot of other people that got interviewed as well for the position. And, I think for me, he said he liked my presence and he liked the way that I interacted with him. And I did know a little bit of history. I just gathered up some history that I knew from high school. And that's how I got it. So it was a little bit of luck to it. I remember getting an answer, and I was like, "Oh wow, I'm actually surprised." So, yeah, it's kind of a special selection process. So, yeah.
Well, you certainly have done a wonderful job leading us around the ship today. Thank you so much. We have, I think, maybe 2 more questions for you. One is a historical question: did the ship ever lose a battle?
No, we are 33-0, and I'll say that with
undefeated, huh?
We are undefeated in all the 33 engagements that we had. We have lost 0. We have lost none of them, and that's of course one of our nicknames that people like to throw around. Old Ironsides, 33-0. So yes, we are undefeated.
That feels really appropriate for a T-shirt, perhaps. I don't know if the museum carries that, but it seems like maybe you
we
should.
definitely have that on one of our crew member T-shirts. It says 33-0 on the back, and it has that on our seal as well, the USS Constitution seal. So,
I love that. That's awesome. There's one more question, and I hope that I interpret this properly, but it says, where is all the special and lovely rope made nowadays? Is that a lost art technology?
Well, back in the day, it was made in Connecticut. I believe nowadays, as well as our masts as well, are bought over from Indiana. But of course, the rope is a synthetic material called, oceanic, I believe. And I'm not exactly 100% sure where it is brought from, but I think it is brought from the same place that our masts which is somewhere in Indiana. I don't know exactly the location. But back in the day, the hemp, they used hemp, was actually natural material, was from Connecticut. So nowadays it's a synthetic material, but it's a lot cheaper and easier to handle. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Seek. I think that covers the majority of the questions about the ship specifically. So if you can hang out for just a minute, maybe some will surface and I'll get those over to you. But we actually have a question for Amor, which I would love to ask if you could come back with us, Amor. Could you tell us a little bit more about what an information wartime officer does?
Oh, sure. So first off, thank you, Sadiq. That was a very cool tour and also phenomenal history. Absolutely wonderful. And in terms of what an information warfare officer does, so again, there are 4 prongs to information warfare. There's the actual information collection side of the house, which is cryptology. And then there's also the meteorology and oceanography part where we also take soundings. investigate the ocean sea floor, study the weather as it relates to naval operations, provide all that information, compile it into intelligence briefings and what have you, with context clues for the cultural history of the area, everything going on, current events and what have you. And then the information professional side of the house actually ensures, as they call it, C2, which is command and control. So basically, basically comms throughout our naval forces, and also ensures network security for our services as well, if that all makes sense.
I'm sure to some people, they absolutely positively could get all of that. Thank you, Amor. But I have a comment that I want to share with you. And Amor was a last minute addition to this program today. And we are so grateful to have you here, especially all the way from Hawaii, and the wonderful connection to Grace Hopper and to Yale. It's just been absolutely amazing to see how this is all interconnected. So I can't thank you enough for being here. And I want to share with you a comment that we just received from Barb. Hopefully it's okay that I say your name, Barb. She wanted to say that she earned her IDWO pin back in 2010. Wow. She is a fellow Yale class of 81, retired captain, and she is so happy to see more Yale women in the Navy. So I just wanted to share that with you because that's a really special thing to do.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yes, wow. Thank you so much, ma'am. That's very, very cool to hear. Class of 81, just because it's information warfare. So we've actually shifted a name from the Information Dominance Corps to the Information Warfare Community. So it's very cool to hear that we have other IWOs in the fleet from before. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you again, Amor, for being here. It's wonderful to have you. I think
Thank
if Seek is still here, we do have one more question about the ship. And then I have a couple questions that were submitted in advance for Ed and Ann that I would love to share as well. So Seek, just another quick question. And then I think maybe you might want to get over to the barbecue, and I don't blame you because it sounds like a lot of fun. We have a question about how much the cannons weigh.
So the guns here, the long guns, because we have two choices of armament. You know, we have the long range option, which is the long guns, and then the carronades, which are on the spar deck. Those are 32. I'm sorry, they are. How much is it? Well, the long guns, those are 6,500 pounds. That I know for sure. The carronades, I believe, are 1,200 pounds, and of course, the long guns fire a shot of 24 pounds. The actual shot they fire is just a basic round shot is 24 pounds, and carronades fire the 32-pound shot. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And there's another question that I saw on Facebook come through, a question about uniforms. I don't know who might like to take that, but there was a question of like, what kind of uniforms were there on the ship? Or maybe does the museum have a collection? It's a question about uniforms for folks on the ship. So perhaps, I don't know, maybe Ann or Ed, does the museum itself have a collection of uniforms that people would be able to see when they visited the museum?
Ann, do you want to take that?
Well, we do have, in the museum,
you can, whoever would like to answer that can go right ahead.
Well, I'll answer it on my end. For us here in the Navy, we stationed at this command, we do get the 1812s on top of the NWUs, which are the just the basic service uniforms that we wear, or the work uniforms that we wear. So yeah, we have the 1812s, and of course on top of that we have the dress uniforms, the whites, the blues that we wear. The white is what we wear right now in the summer. So in terms of additional uniforms, the only additional uniforms we have are the 1812s. And the rest of the uniforms that we have are Navy regulation, what everybody else in the Navy has. So.
And Ann, do you have some collections in the museum as well?
So yes, the museum has helped the Navy with the research to identify what would a sailor in 1812 have been wearing. And while there were specific rules about the captain's uniform and exactly what that would look like, the active duty sailors would wear sort of more loose-fitting, more common clothing that would have been available to sailors on merchant ships or naval ships. They had not, in 1812, created a specific uniform for the enlisted crew. So what you see the sailors wearing today is common clothing that seafarers would have been wearing. Obviously, our Navy has progressed and been much more specific about what each rank should wear. But in 1812, it was early enough that for the common sailors, they were sailors who might have been on a merchant ship for a time and then on a naval vessel and would take that same duffel bag from one post to the next.
Great, thank you, Anne. And we're going to talk a little bit towards the very end of the program about how folks can access a little more information about the museum, what kind of things you have coming up, and how you're coping with this COVID era of not being able to visit anyone. But I'm so glad that we're all here today because we're bringing a little bit of Boston to everybody. I have another question for Amor before we let her go about her day, because it is her day off, folks. So we're very grateful for her time today. We have someone that would like to know, as an IWO, I think is what you said, do you also stand watch and qualify as an OOD?
So it's actually a very, very good question, and it's changed very recently. So before, IWOs could qualify OOD, which is actually Officer of the Deck, which is the captain's direct representative on the bridge while the ship is underway. But as it stands right now, no, we are not permitted, as we are not SWOs, which are Surface Warfare Officers. So the Navy recently changed its rules, and as a non-SWO, I'm not permitted to stand any bridge watch, as far as I've been told so far. So with that in mind, instead, when the ship is underway, I will work towards qualifying as a SICWO. So that's actually the officer for the Combat Information Center. But as of right now, no.
Thank you very much. I think that is all the questions, rapid fire, for both Amor and Seek. And now I think we're going to switch gears back over to the museum, because I did get 2 questions in advance, one of which Seek answered, but the other was a really interesting question that I had received in advance about a penny collection that young children used to do. And Ed and I discussed this prior to coming live. So if Anne or Ed would like to tell us a little bit about the history of the penny collection in our country to support Old Ironsides.
And do you want to take that?
Sure. And USS Constitution has had a very long life to be launched as one of the first 6 ships in our Navy, when you would expect a ship to last 15 or 20 years, but she sailed actively for a full century. And then by the 1920s, when she's more than a century old, she was falling into a bit of disrepair late in the 1800s, and there were efforts to try and restore the ship. And Congress appropriated some money, but by the 1920s, they decided to make it a national fundraising campaign. So school children nationwide were invited to contribute pennies to save Old Ironsides, and school children did, and companies did, and this fundraising campaign allowed Constitution, it supported the ship's restoration. The Navy also chipped in. But if you can imagine, in the 1920s, raising over $100,000 to restore this ship, and it became a point of pride. Many people, when they gave their pennies, might get a little souvenir, and many people of the grandparent age can remember their Constitution souvenir to say thank you to the people who contributed to the ship's restoration. Between 1931 and 1934, Constitution went on a national tour. And if you can imagine, in the midst of the Great Depression, if in your port in California, if she left from Boston, went up to Maine, down the East Coast, went all the way through the Panama Canal. She went through at Christmas time. So at the very tippy tops of her masts, they had Christmas trees up there, through the canal, on up the West Coast, all the way up to Washington State. When they were there, we got to do a oral history with about a half dozen crew members who served aboard at that time. And one of them, I'll never forget, Steve Sivko, was a Marine, and he was about 6 feet 6 inches tall. And they said to him, "Steve, you're so tall, you go put those trees on the top of the mast." So he was the one who had to climb all the way up to the tippy top of the mast. You can see behind Ed where you see an American flag there. So he put the trees at the top. And then when they were in Washington State, somebody came aboard to visit, and they were carrying a little bear cub. And Steve was a colorful guy and said, "Hey, how much for that bear cub?" And they said, "Here, you can have it." So the bear cub joined the crew of Constitution, and they traveled, they went to Washington State, they started their way back down the West Coast, and they were wintering over in San Diego. And the bear they had named Scrappy, and they all had fun playing with the bear. But the bear kept growing as they kept moving down the coast, and the bear got into a little tussle with an officer that didn't go so well for the officer. So Scrappy the bear lived out the rest of his life at the San Diego Zoo, while Constitution then continued on in the spring down from California, back through the canal and back to Boston. So the Pennies campaign is what restored the ship at that time. And it was a model that was used again. The ship just celebrated her 200th birthday in 1997. So the ship had not sailed for over a century. And in order to get sails for Constitution, the museum worked with other volunteers, former commanding officers, and launched another Pennies campaign and raised pennies to buy sails for Constitution, so that on her 200th birthday in 1997, she got to set sail for the first time in 116 years. So we love the Pennies campaign.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for answering that and for telling us that story. And to the person who submitted that question, what a great connection, what a great story to be able to bring up. Thank you so much, Anne. I think we have two other questions that Ed was going to address. Was the earlier question about Paul Revere, and also a little information about the term loose cannon. So go ahead, Ed.
Sure. An earlier question was also about the ship and connection to Paul Revere. I'll start a little bit, and Anne can, if I go awry, Anne can correct me. But in addition to the ship being part of Paul Revere, of course, the ship features copper from Paul Revere as a way for really below water protection of the ship against worms. And so one of the reasons we're really proud of the ship is it really sort of connects so many different strands of American history, and Paul Revere is certainly part of that. I wanted to build upon, Seaman Seek took us through really a great description of the guns and the warfare. And one of the things terms I've come to appreciate in my time in the museum was actually the origin of the term loose cannon. As my Navy colleagues have taught me, the gun drill, if you ever get a chance to see one, is an incredible enterprise. And it was so important in the midst of the war that Seek was talking about, that you keep your guns, the things recoil, and then you've got to reload it, and you've got to keep, the pitched battle, et cetera. And the thing you don't want to have happen is to kind of topple over in that long cannon to become literally a loose cannon, because it could then roll from side to side on the ship. You could actually break through the wall. You could actually sink your own ship if you didn't take care of your gun and became a loose cannon. It was a court-martialable offense. And so that's the term loose cannon. If you hear about, hey, they're a loose cannon, well, that's actually comes from this time of warfare. And I thought that might kind of be a fun story to share from Constitution to today's lingo.
Thanks, Ed. I think we're getting to the end of our time today, but I want to give Anne and Ed an opportunity to tell everyone how they can further connect with the museum, with the ship itself in the time of COVID. What are you guys doing? How have things been for you, and how can people see you in the future?
Anne, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, we are pleased that we have just reopened our doors for the folks who are in the Boston area. We are open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 10 until 5, and USS Constitution is open for tours Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're located here in the Charlestown Navy Yard, so the World War II destroyer Cassin Young is also here. So you can have a great day outdoors on the waterfront in Boston. Come on over, tour, and visit us at the museum. Or for those of you, I've seen many participants who are not in the Boston area, so we still have the virtual museum, which is active every day. There's something new on our social media platforms. We have a historian at home who is giving you more interesting insights into Constitution's history. We're running programs for families, for summer camps. We have something for folks of all ages. So we encourage you to check out the virtual museum at ussconstitutionmuseum.org. And we have a great panel coming up next week that I know Ed is itching to tell you all about.
Absolutely. So next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, the museum is hosting a panel called Protecting Global Commerce. It's a free virtual panel discussion. We have 3 experts, scholarly experts, who will be discussing Constitution's history of protecting maritime commerce and how that legacy is reflected in deployments of U.S. Navy ships today. So like we did today, but it's actually going to connect the history of Constitution to actually the activities that are happening in the South China Sea and provide historical context to today's news. You just have to go to our website, usscm.org, where you can register for the Zoom there. We'd love to have you join and continue to learn and share in Constitution. I'll also say that in the chat, I've put in my email address, and I'm happy to connect with anybody offline, answer any questions about Constitution, connect you in any way to any of the learning activities, virtual activities that we do here at the museum, and information about the ship. We're thrilled to be part of this. We're thrilled to have connected Yale audiences and supported our Navy and our colleagues. I think you can see why we're so proud of our colleagues in the Navy. Grateful to Amor, grateful to Seaman Seek and Captain Benda's crew, and terrific for having us all together here. And Stephanie, thank you for bringing us together. And thanks to the Yale Boston and Yale veterans as well.
Thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful afternoon spent with all of you, especially on such a historic day for the ship itself. What a wonderful convergence of so many different things to make this happen today. To Ed and to Anne, thank you so much. We've been talking about this for a long time. I'm so glad that we finally got to do this and be here together, and to have Amor with us has been absolutely amazing. To Seaman Seek, thank you so much for a wonderful tour. Oh, that's not Seaman
No
Seek,
worries.
but I do like, that is a similar uniform. You guys must be on the same undefeated team. Thank you guys all for being here. To my friend Kevin Winston in LA, who helps us with the Yale Alumni Facebook group. To everyone who watched today, this has been recorded and will be posted for you to go back and to watch, and we'll provide all the links to the museum, to the ship, to upcoming events and activities. We loved having you. Thank you so much. Check it out at alumni.yale.edu. We've got other upcoming Yale Alumni Live events, and we'd love to have you back. So those of you who are in the Zoom and want to hang out, have maybe a couple more questions, want to talk to Amor, Ed, or Ann, we'll be here for a few more minutes, but we're going to go off live now. And thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right.